Hey, I'm Pusher, and this is another Music Minute Breakdown where we talk about how music works. And today we're going to take a closer look at my own remix of I Wanna Know by NOTD and Bea Miller. So NOTD is a Swedish producer duo made up of Tobias Danielsson and Samuel Brand. And so far they've had a really impressive run, accumulating over 225 million combined streams since their first release in late 2016. They've done official remixes for Shawn Mendes, Ed Sheeran, Demi Lovato, Sia, Alessia Cara, and Rihanna. And their remix of Romantic by Stanage has just crushed 100 million streams on Spotify alone. It got there just a couple weeks ago. But in August of 2017, they put out their first single with Dagny called Summer of Love. In March of this year, just last month, they released I Wanna Know with Bea Miller, my remix of which I'll be discussing today. Now, Bea Miller was a contestant on the second season of X Factor and has since signed to Hollywood Records. Fun fact, Hollywood Records actually also releases Queen. Now, Bea Miller's debut album, Not an Apology, came out in July of 2015, and it debuted at number 7 on the Billboard Top 200. She's toured with Fifth Harmony, Demi Lovato, DNCE, is that pronounced dance? And Selena Gomez. Throughout 2017, she released 3 different EPs, each one with a different emotional theme tied to a primary color. And then in February 2018, they all came together for her second album, Aurora. And that brings us to now. So I Wanna Know is a collaboration between NOTD and Bea Miller, and in its first month alone, it's racked up 13 million streams on Spotify. And lucky for me, I got to remix it. The remix actually just came out on Friday. You can listen to it on Spotify or Apple Music. I'll leave a link in the description to that. Anyway, today I figured I'd take a look at some of the writing and production things that I did with this remix, and do a sort of mini breakdown on some of the things that I do when I'm producing. So first, let's look at the global information. The track is 120 BPM, same as the original. It's in G sharp minor, the relative of B major, same as the original. The time signature is 12/8. If you're not super familiar with music theory, this is the same as 4/4 time, where you have 4 beats in every bar, but the top number 12 has been multiplied by 3 because every beat contains a triplet. Latch by Disclosure and Sam Smith, for example, is in 12/8. Anyway, my remix runs 3 minutes and 24 seconds, coming in at just 7 seconds longer than the original, and it's 102 bars long. Now let's talk about the form of my remix compared to the original. Of the original song, all I kept was the vocal. And so the forms of the two are actually pretty similar, because I was just following what the vocal was doing. Both songs have a 3-act form. Act 1 has an intro, verse, pre-chorus, chorus, and a drop. Act 2 repeats the verse, pre-chorus, chorus, and drop. Then you have a bridge, and you do the chorus a couple times for the outro. In the remix, all of the sections are 8 bars long, except for the 2-bar intro, 1 bar after the song ends, and then after the bridge, before the last 2 choruses, there's a 1-bar break in both my remix and in the original. As for differences, the drop in Act 2 I did twice as opposed to once in the original. The bridge in the original is actually 50% longer than mine, at 12 bars instead of 8. And on the end of the original, there's sort of an ambient outro where I just end mine. Now let's look at some of the production and writing tricks that I used. So one of the things I always love to do in a remix is change up the chords. I have a very particular sound and aesthetic that I like to go for with bright, shiny music, and I usually like to have semi-uplifting R&B chords with that. So the chords that I'm using throughout this song are G sharp minor 7, F sharp over A sharp, which leads up to B major, which would be the relative major, and then like a C sharp 9 sus, or B over C sharp. And then right before the chorus comes in, when Bea Miller sings I Wanna Know, I've used like a leading tone chord. It's like a G diminished chord with an F sharp on top. And I'm kind of thinking of this as like a dominant chord, like a D sharp 7, but without the D sharp underneath it. But this is supposed to be like a crunchy, dissonant, dominant chord that leads back to the tonic in a stronger, more interesting way, just leading into the chorus. And I've basically just taken these chords and blocked them out so each one lasts a bar, and I'm using Infected Mushroom's Manipulator vocoder. So here's what these chords sound like with just the vocal running through the vocoder.
Your body, like I moved your body, 'cause I wanna know, yeah, I wanna know. Does she make you feel wanted? Is she all you wanted? 'Cause I wanna know, yeah, I wanna know. I want to know.
If you saw my Bruno Mars and Cardi B finesse breakdown a couple weeks ago, you'll remember the trick of filling in space between vocal phrases with an echo delay. I've done that in the verses of this song. Here's what that sounds like on its own.
Is she the one? The one you've been waiting for? Is she the one?
One trick that I really like to include in my writing is sort of foreshadowing. So if you've got like a hook melody like we've got in the drop here, which sounds like this, then I want to take little chunks of that melody and sort of pepper them into the song right from the start. You can hear it in the intro of the song, sort of in the background, filling in space. And that sounds like this.
Is she the one? The one you've been waiting for? Is she the one? Is she the one?
There There are two different ways that I commonly like to break up sections of a song. One is with the writing, like using different chord progressions in different sections, and the other, which is very common right now in pop music, is to break up sections with the arrangement. So in one section you'll have a certain collection of instruments, and in other sections you'll have different collections, whether it's more instruments to make the section seem bigger, or less instruments to bring the intensity down. So if you listen to just the leads and the chords and the bass soloed between the different sections, you'll hear what I mean. So the verse sounds like this. The pre-chorus will sound like this. The chorus will sound like this. And the drop will sound like this. I mentioned that the second and third drops are actually 16 bars long, making them twice as long as any other section, because it happens twice. And I felt like doubling it would add to the momentum of the song, and it feels like it gives you more time to sort of just enjoy the groove. Typically, if you're going to double a section, you'll want something to change in the second one, and usually I would do a lot more maybe with leads or with chords or something in a second repetition. But in this instance, pretty much the only thing I changed was adding hi-hats, and the hi-hats are panned hard left and right, so it sort of opens up the stereo field a little bit in the high end, and I feel like it keeps things going pretty well, even though there's not really too much changed. Anyway, here's what that difference sounds like.
Oh, no.
Now for the breakdowns, I wanted a very light touch. I usually take sort of a kitchen sink approach to production, but this bridge felt like it needed a big breakdown from the energy of the drops, and has so much activity in the vocal that adding almost anything else felt like kind of too much. So there's no percussion at all. It starts out with just the vocal and the vocoder, and a single note of a synth underneath it. As it progresses, I add a second note to that, so it's like these two-note skeletons of chords. And I use a couple of the counter melodies that happen in other places in the song, so even though the bridge is a contrast, it's still connected to the other sections in some way. But this bridge is really all about the vocal and that vocoder chord underneath it. Everything else is just supposed to support that and make it feel a little more polished.
Does you move your body like I moved your body? 'Cause I wanna know, yeah, I wanna know. Does she make you feel wanted? Is she all you wanted? 'Cause I wanna know, yeah, I wanna know. I want to.
Now let's talk about a couple of the sound design things. Probably the most noticeable slap you in the face sound in this song is this funky vibrato lead chord. So let's crack open Massive where I made this sound. If you look in Massive here, what we've got is envelope 2 routed to the LFO for a quick attack and a quick decay, which is what gives it that punchy, stabby attack. And I've also got the mod wheel on the keyboard routed to the same low pass filter. In the OSC tab, this is also routed to the vibrato of the sound, so that as I use the mod wheel to open up the cutoff, the sound also gets a lot of vibrato in it. Here's what that looks like with the MIDI, and the first macro automating the cutoff and the vibrato. Otherwise, the sound has been unison doubled with a little bit of width on the unison spread, which makes the sound a little bit phasey. And then I've used the noise oscillator to add a little bit of the bright noise, just for a little bit of high frequency presence. Otherwise, there's really not too much to this sound. Except in the oscillator section, I've used the pulse saw PWM and pitched that up an octave to make the sound overall a little bit bigger. I would say that in almost every patch I make in Massive, I'm using all 3 oscillators pitched at octaves. And then I change the relative amps to make some of the higher ones quieter or louder as needed. Another sound I like is this synthy, funky mono bass in Massive. I've used the mono function so that I can overlap notes with this bass without them re-triggering every time, which allows me to have a punchy bass when I need it for attack, and it also allows me to create more subtle melodies without that attack if I simply overlap the MIDI notes a bit. Here's what that sounds like with the drums for a bit of context. In Massive, you'll see that again I have 2 oscillators pitched an octave apart, and I wanted this bass to sound a little bit more analog. So you can see I've routed LFO5 to the pitch of the two oscillators and set each one to plus 24 cents. And I use the performer LFO and basically just hit random. And it just gives me this weird shape that the pitch of my oscillators is going to follow up to a maximum of a quarter of a semitone, 24 cents. And it adds just the tiniest hint of a natural detune, even though technically it's sharp, for a slightly more natural flavor. And this is really one of those more theoretical things that you're not going to necessarily hear, but I feel like it kind of contributes to the feel of the song. I've routed envelope 1 to the LFO so that I have punch and then it sustains at a slightly lower level, which is where the cutoff will sit when I have overlapping MIDI melodies. To change to this mono setting, you would go into the voicing tab and you would click on mono rotate and you would want the trigger to be set to legato triller. That makes it so the first note attacks, and as long as any subsequent notes are being overlapped, it will perform like it's one continuous note. And otherwise the sound is just a little bit of a small reverb and some dimension expander for width. I also rolled off the low frequency at about 68 Hz. This isn't a technical thing, I was just going with my ear. And lastly, I wanted to toss out some of the production and mixing techniques that I use. When I'm mixing a song, I think of the thing as an ecosystem. So the main focus is always going to be the vocals. And then the secondary focus is going to be the beat or the rhythm, which mostly comes from the drums. And so you really want to feel the repeating presence of that pulse. Anyone who produces is familiar with sidechain compression, where you send the signal of one thing off in the kick to affect the sound of something else, usually with a compressor. And so what I've done in this song is taken the kick and set it to compressors on a few different aspects in the song. First off, everyone's listening to the vocal, and so I didn't want that to be too drastic. So what I did is I put a compressor on the vocal so that when the kick happens, it presses the vocal down no more than 5 decibels. This creates a slight pulse in the vocal that you almost don't even hear at all. And it really just makes the kick feel more powerful, and it doesn't sound like the vocal's being pressed down. Here's what that sounds like with and without.
I want to know. I want to know.
So it's a very subtle touch. I've also done the exact same thing, sending the kick to the leads, the chords, and the bass. And it's not so much to hear a pulsing feeling in these instruments, as it is to slightly push these sounds down and make the kick stand out more. I usually treat different frequency ranges differently, with more high frequency stuff like leads and vocals getting less compression on them, where things like chords and bass would get a little bit more. But you can use this trick however you see fit. Another excellent plugin that I use for a similar function is the Waves Factory Track Spacer. This is basically just a multiband compressor, so the signal that you send in is only going to compress the frequencies where the original signal is happening. And I use this in the same way as a sidechain compressor, but when I want to carve out a more specific spectral space. Normally what I would use this plugin for is 2 things. I send the kick to the bass, so that the low frequency of the bass isn't overpowering the kick, because I want to be feeling the kick. And I send the vocals to the leads and the chords, so that anywhere that the chords and the leads would overpower the vocal, I'm using the track spacer to push down any masking frequencies, because the main focus is the vocal. So the big takeaway here, I think, is that any track is an ecosystem. Think about what your focus is, in this case it's the vocals and the kick, and use the tools at your disposal to make sure that what you're supposed to be focusing on remains the focus. Anyway, that's been my Music Minute breakdown of my own remix of Noted and Bea Miller's I Wanna Know. Don't forget to go listen to the remix on Spotify. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. I have a Patreon where you can sign up to send me $1 every time I release a Music Minute breakdown video, which helps fund the creation of these videos. You can help spread the word by sharing this video with anyone who might enjoy it or learn something from it. Feel free to hit me up on Twitter or Instagram or Reddit or Facebook. Otherwise, until next time, thanks for watching.